or elsewhere. My name is Ekaterina Metravelli, and I'm a president of Georgian Foundation for Strategic and International Studies, Rondelli Foundation, a Tbilisi-based think tank. Today, we're hosting an event in cooperation with the Embassy of Ukraine to Georgia, and I would like to welcome our co-host of our event, our friend and partner ambassador of Ukraine to Georgia, Igor Dolgov. But before proceeding to the content of the discussion, the occupation of Ukraine and Georgia, I would like to say a couple words about the February 23rd. I won't take lots of time, very briefly. It's a sad day in Georgia, and not only because of February 23rd, which is a remembrance day of our junkers who have fallen down for Georgia's freedom 100 years ago in 1921, but also due to the developments that took place several hours ago. Maybe those events on the same dates are mere coincidences, but whether we want or not, the dates definitely have a symbolic meaning. By the way, it's also the day of deportation of Chechens and Ingush by Soviets. And today, on this symbolic for us Georgians Day, instead of Georgian people and the whole society to stand hand in hand all across the country, protesting Russian occupation both 100 years ago as well as today, and working together for the common goal of distancing ourselves from the Soviet past, anchoring the country towards European Euro-Atlantic integration, we are with our actions contributing to the Russian cause. Since our very independence, the division within our society has been skillfully used by Russia many times to achieve its goals, and it's perceived near abroad and elsewhere, including Georgia and Ukraine. We believe that the arrest of the opposition leader and storming of the party headquarters, aggression and force is not the solution, and this type of approach does not support the path that most Georgians want to pursue, become part of the European and Euro-Atlantic family. The way it works is that the government carries a responsibility both for the successes and failures taking place in the country. And in this particular case, we believe that the aggressive rhetoric does not dissolve the tension, but rather enhances further polarization and division of the society, which is at the end disastrous for our future. This is what I wanted to say on behalf of my organization. And due to the situation in the country, some of our high-level participants from Georgian government had to cancel their participation in the last minute. So we are sorry for these inconveniences, but we hope that we still will manage to lead the discussion in the direction we planned, and with focus on the topics so important and urgent and painful, both for Georgia and Ukraine, which is the occupation of our countries, and how both states, international organizations, and civil society institutions can become more efficient, and what can they do for advancing this process. Georgia and Ukraine have been connected by strong bonds of historical friendship for a long time. We have a lot in common, and we have been both our will to build a free and democratic society and many of the difficulties we face in this effort. One unfortunate thing that our two countries have in common is Russia's extreme hostility to our national freedom and democracy. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia has been engaged in efforts to undermine democracy of both Georgia and Ukraine. Under Putin, Russia elevated its hostility to a new level, committing military aggression against Georgia and Ukraine, and engaging in indirect territorial occupation. Beyond the notions of national sovereignty, there stand so many individual fates that have been shattered by the Russian aggression. Whether it is ethnic cleansing in Abkhazia and Skhinvali region or systematic persecution in Crimea, Russian aggression destroys and distorts the real lives of real people. The recent example of such an action is sentencing a Georgian citizen, Zaza Gacheladze, to 12 years and 6 months in prison after Russian-led security actors shot and detained him nearly 7 months ago along the South Ossetia administrative boundary line. What the Russian regime has been doing in Ukraine and Georgia is a part of its broader agenda of imperial resurgence in Russia's neighborhood. And this regional agenda goes in parallel with Russia's subversive actions against democratic countries around the world. When 7 years ago, Moscow started the occupation of Crimea, when it launched the war in Donbass, and before that, when Russian troops invaded Georgia in 2008, the purpose was not just conquering some particular provinces. These aggressions were among the Russian activities that served the goal of controlling historical futures of Georgia and Ukraine. The common goal that both Ukrainians and Georgians have today is for our future to remain in the hands of our peoples, not Moscow. For this, we must keep working hard to face the challenges that today threaten our security as well as our democracy. All of us, whether in the civil service or the non-governmental sector, have our role to play in this endeavor. Support from our foreign democratic friends and partners is crucial in this work. And at the same time, we, the countries and societies that are targeted most directly by the adversaries of our sovereignty in the Kremlin, should do whatever we can do to help each other face our common threats and challenges. This gathering has become already a tradition. We have been gathering already for 4th year to discuss how state, international, and civil society institutions can address the complex issues of occupation. Unfortunately, not much has changed for the better. Territorial integrity of our countries is violated, militarization, aggression, and annexation process is growing. The Kremlin toolkit is quite diverse and wide, and it is similar in Ukraine and Georgia, exploiting other means of influences as well, in addition to aggression. We believe that it's important to keep the occupation under a spotlight and then continue on the discussion about the harsh realities our countries face and try to elaborate joint mechanisms of response. Exactly for these purposes, we have gathered here today, and we are honored to have distinguished guests from both Ukraine and Georgia who will share with us their perspectives in the first and second panels of this discussion on renewed approaches of Ukraine and Georgia on countering Russian activities and main challenges to the protection of human rights, while the contributors to the third panel, enhancing the international support for the occupation of Ukraine and Georgia, are ambassadors of our friendly nations to Georgia, and specifically of Poland, Lithuania, Germany, and France. Thank you, Your Excellencies. Welcome to the webinar. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for the support. Thank you to all the panelists. And before proceeding to the discussion and to the first panel, I would like to give the floor to co-host of our event, our friend, Ambassador of Ukraine to Georgia, His Excellency Hordokho. Ambassador,
yes, thank you.
This virtual floor.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much, dear Eka, Your Excellencies, dear participants. I'm sure that despite some changes in the program, we will have a very interesting and useful discussion. So before we start our panels, I would like to make several remarks concerning the overall situation and trying to understand why we are under occupation now. So just a few days ago, together with Georgian friends, we celebrated 100 years of the Constitution of Georgia. It was a remarkable event, but only in the context of today's dates, one could understand that Georgian Constitution and the Georgian independence lasted for 5 days after the adoption of this Constitution. And after that, Soviets occupied Georgia. Ukrainian People's Republic also could not resist Soviets and Red Army. So 70 years, both Georgia and Ukraine were under the occupation. It more than enough to understand that we want to be in the European family of peoples, not to be a part of Ruski Mir, which is a very dangerous and false idea. Ruski Mir is driven by one aim only: to support, to suppress, and to keep tight. Do not allow peoples to make their own choice and to develop themselves. We learned also that democracy is a long process, which is based on values and which is based also on compromises. And the price of democracy is high. We also have to understand that and to recognize. And the occupation of parts of territories of Ukraine and Georgia is also about democracy. And one should also keep in mind that there is no places for compromises which are relevant to democracy in points like this: territorial integrity and national sovereignty. We will never forgive our struggle for our territories, and we will call on international community and all, we will use all possible tools to leave this issue, very important for us, on the top of the agenda of all possible international and national fora. With this, I would like again to thank all those who accepted our invitation and joined today's roundtable. And I agree that this roundtable is already a kind of traditional, the fourth time we organize together such an event. But this year, we have a unique opportunity due to pandemic restrictions to enlarge our auditorium and to invite much more people from NGOs and other countries, including Ukraine and including Europe. Thank you very much, and I expect very fruitful discussions.
Thank you, Ambassador. I do agree with you that pandemic has this one benefit, that we can connect with the people which we could not earlier, and enlarge our audience and the participants, which is a true benefit. And I also look for the fruitful discussion. Now let me switch to the first panel, which is renewed approaches of Ukraine and Georgia on countering Russian aggression, the occupation, restoring their territorial integrity, and strengthening non-recognition policy. And we have distinguished speakers at the panel. As I've mentioned already, unfortunately, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Georgia, Lasha Darsalia, who cannot participate, though I see him registered, but I just got a call a couple of minutes ago. He cannot participate due to these circumstances in Georgia. But we have the representative of the Office of the State Minister of Georgia for Reconciliation and Civic Equality as a presenter, head of the Policy Analysis, Planning and International Relations Department, Ms. Tamar Kochoradze. From Ukraine, we have a distinguished speaker, Mr. Anton Korinevich, permanent representative of the President of Ukraine, the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, and Ms. Emini Japarova, First Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, to talk about the topic of today's discussion. Thank you all the panelists for the participation. Each speaker was supposed to have 5 minutes, and now we have because we have less speakers, we can devote more time and can have up to 7 minutes for the opening remarks. And then I hope that we will have time left for the questions. We would be interesting to hear about the update of the situation, current formats, renewed policies, the new international Crimean platform, specifically from our Ukrainian speakers. But also it would be interesting to hear from your perspective, how the change in the EU and US towards Russia, the talks about the new sanctions, might affect our countries, what Georgia and Ukraine can do together in this new context, what can be the joint efforts that might help our countries to advance their interests. So we look forward to your presentations. And Ms. Kochoradze, let's start with you. Thank you for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting us to this very important online roundtable that has the aim of discussing the most acute issue that relates to the deoccupation of Ukraine and Georgia, because for us, of course, this remains as one of the biggest challenges of the country and one of the issues that actually affects the whole development of the country in terms of the democratic development as well as the European integration process. So thank you very much for bringing up this issue, and we do remember that this is already a kind of a tradition established. I would not say a very good one, because the cause is quite bad, but still, you know, thank you for bringing up this issue, because despite all the developments in the region, internally, globally, I think that the issue of the Russian aggression and occupation of its neighboring countries is of utmost priority. During this week, as you also already mentioned, we are marking 100 years since the adoption of the first Georgian constitution, as well as the Soviet occupation of Georgia. We remember the tragic history of our country when the first democratic government of the sovereign state had to face the Russian aggression and invasion. Today, in 21st century, in the immediate neighborhood of the European Union and in Eastern European, Eastern Partnership countries, Georgia and Ukraine, we are still have to everyday struggle with the Russian occupation. Following the first days of independence, we have encountered hard power tools, the use of force and military occupation of our territories, as well as various elements of hybrid warfare that continue up to now. The policy of division and rule mastered by Russia throughout centuries still works even after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. This policy found implications in nearly all post-Soviet countries, and we are very often reiterating that 5 out of 6 Eastern European countries have to counter either occupation, annexation, ethnic or political conflicts on a daily basis, exercised with a direct participation or support from Russia. And this really cannot be considered as a coincidence, but as a result of targeted and well-mastered policy to create hotspots inside the territories that Russia still considers to be the sphere of its influence. In all these hotspots, Russia has a defined strategy and role of either a party to the conflict or performing a role of a neutral mediator and an alleged peacekeeper. The cases of Georgia and Ukraine are, of course, of no exception. On the contrary, the aggression against Georgia in 2008, as well as annexation of Crimea in 2014, and the armed conflict maintained up to now in eastern Ukraine is a part of a far-reaching policy that was also outlined by you as well. If we look at this from a wider perspective, we'll see that, in fact, in both cases, the steps, approaches, policy and the applied tools are pretty similar. As one of the first witnesses and victims of Russia's destructive policy, unfortunately, Georgia knows best Russia's long-used policy to influence the European and Euro-Atlantic aspirations of the country and to hamper its development through activating artificially maintained and fully controlled conflict zones. In this regard, the recent decision of the European Court of Human Rights came as no surprise, as it merely reiterated the vivid fact of Russia being an occupying power responsible for all the human rights violations inside the occupied territories of Abkhazia and Crimean region, South Ossetia. As you all very well know, in 2018, the entire international community witnessed widespread aggression and military intervention of Russia in Georgia that resulted in the illegal occupation of 20% of Georgia's territories, ethnic cleansing of local population, and forcible expulsion of thousands of IDPs and refugees who are up to now denied the right to safe and dignified return to their homes. Over the years, Russia managed to de facto annex and integrate Georgian regions of Abkhazia and Crimean region into its political, military, financial, and social system, thus taking total control of every sphere of life. And in this regard, we had the recent development in November 2020, when the so-called agreement, well, not the agreement, but the program was signed on the in the field of socio-economic integration. That was a one more step taken forward, the de facto annexation of the Georgian region by Russia. Russian FSB officers are dislocated on the occupation lines with a task to protect the so-called border inside Georgia. With this alleged aim, they periodically install the barbed wires and other artificial obstacles, the length of which equals to 100 kilometers. These barriers separate people, communities, and families, deprive them of a possibility to access their own lands, orchards, and even graves of family members remained on the other side. They also target interaction and confidence building between people that has been particularly on rise during the recent years. Those striving to overcome these wires and fences from both sides are detained, tried, beaten, and sometimes even killed. As we speak now, 5 Georgian citizens continue to be illegally imprisoned in Sukhumi and Trinvali, despite enormous efforts of Georgian government and the calls of the international community. You have also emphasized this outrageous case of illegal imprisonment of Zaza Gakheladze that was condemned by the whole international community. The most alarming for us is everyday suffering of population inside the occupied territories and along the occupation lines who are held hostages of political games and unresolved conflict. They are subject to grave and systematic human rights violations, notwithstanding ethnicity. However, ethnically Georgian population still remaining in Gali district of Abkhazia region and in Akhalgori district of Trinvali region remain most vulnerable. They are subject to ethnic discrimination, ethnically targeted violence, constant violation of various fundamental rights. Regretfully, as time goes on, the situation only worsens. Over the years, we were observing the closure of crossing points and imposition of additional physical or regulatory obstacles to hamper the movement and interaction across the divide. The so-called crossing points in the direction of Trinvali region are closed for 1.5 years already. That leads to the full isolation of the region and humanitarian crisis. This resembles the policy of the Soviet Union to block itself and its population from open contact with the civilized world. Most importantly, this is done against the background of increased willingness of people to come on Georgia-controlled territory and interact with people on the other side of the divide. We try to counter Russia's destructive actions through continued commitment for peace and stability, persistently pursuing the policy of peaceful conflict resolution. This policy has 2 pillars. One is deoccupation vis-à-vis Russia, that includes the compliance of Russia with the ceasefire agreement, with the deployment of international security mechanisms on the ground, safe and return of IDPs and refugees to their home, and a very strong non-recognition policy. And the second dimension is reconciliation and engagement vis-à-vis communities living inside the occupied territories. Our policy is exclusively human-centric, oriented on the well-being and decent living of conflict-affected people who suffer from the burden of occupation on a daily basis. Despite the absence of effective control over Abkhazia and Trinvali regions, as well as regular provocative and destructive actions of Russia, we are committed to resort to all efforts to ensure that even before the full-fledged resolution of the conflict-affected communities have equal access to the benefits and opportunities available for other citizens of Georgia. The situation and existing challenges require holistic approach and joint endeavors. We are committed to exploit all available resources and instruments at our disposal, including through the Peace Initiative, A Step to a Better Future, that we activated in 2019, and which foresees concrete financial mechanisms for boosting economic activities and improving the socio-economic situation of people on both sides of the divide. We have long witnessed the high interest and need of people to engage in business activities both in Abkhazia and Trinvali regions. However, this dimension gains particular importance now against the backdrop of the global pandemic. Our peace agenda encompasses healthcare, educational, socio-economic, and confidence-building dimensions that envisage special programs designed exclusively to serve the interests of people on both sides of occupation lines. We deeply believe that together
I'm sorry, but we are running out of time, so if you can...
I am finishing, thank you very much. We deeply believe that together with the occupation efforts, building of trust is key to the resolution or conflict on a community level. And in this context, we are committed and stand ready to expand communication on human rights and humanitarian issues, as well as to continue taking care of the vulnerable population. We stand ready and deem important to think together with you what we can do more to efficiently counter Russian aggression. Critical attention of the international community to the situation in the occupied territories is absolutely vital. We need to act together, take joint steps, and intensify endeavors to bring some positive developments and assist those in need. Russia should have a proper understanding that after what it does in Georgia and Ukraine, business as usual cannot continue. It's important that Georgia and Ukraine stay high on the international agenda, and that Russia feels an increased constant pressure and receives a clear message of the international community that in the 21st century, the civilized world will no more tolerate the aggression, occupation, and annexation of the sovereign states. Thank you very much, and apologies for taking too much time.
Thank you, Tamar, for this interesting assessment of the alarming situation as well as Georgian government policies. I'm sure there will be questions, and I also have several, but let us proceed to the next speaker, Mr. Karinevich, permanent representative of the President of Ukraine in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea.
Dear colleagues, good afternoon. Ms. Matrivelli, many thanks for giving me the floor, and many thanks to the Embassy of Ukraine in Georgia, and especially His Excellency Mr. Igor Dolgov, and Rondelli Foundation for having this important talk, this important event for the fourth time about the deoccupation and reintegration of temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine and Georgia. Of course, it is very important to talk about this in particular today when we are coming close to the date which is official now in Ukraine, the day of resistance to the occupation of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol, the 26th of February, this Friday. And last year, the President of Ukraine, His Excellency Mr. Volodymyr Zelensky, signed the respective decree, which established this day as official day in the Ukrainian official calendar. So we're also in Ukraine are planning and are having a lot of events in respect of this day to commemorate this fight of Crimean Tatars, Ukrainians, in order to support the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. And of course, we are very grateful for having this possibility to talk about Crimea in different platforms which deal with our closest partners, as Georgia is, of course. And of course, last year, it was a big pleasure to have a real, I would say, offline meeting in Tbilisi. I think it was a very powerful and important discussion, a very important meetings with colleagues from Georgian government. It was very important to see the administrative boundary line with temporarily occupied Tskhinvali region in Odzisi village, so that this experience is really very important. So thank you for all this. So today I want to talk about basically two issues, about the issues what Ukrainian government does in order to make this deoccupation and reintegration of Crimea happen as soon as possible, and also about human rights violations and current challenges which occur on the temporarily occupied territories of Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol. Of course, as a result of the temporary occupation of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol, Ukraine is faced with the task to provide the necessary humanitarian rights to its citizens during this occupation. Since the beginning of occupation, Ukraine continues to implement its positive obligations related to the residents of the temporarily occupied Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol in all areas of public life. Ukraine provides an unhindered access of residents of temporarily occupied territories of Crimea to administrative services by creating a wide network of administrative centers throughout the territory controlled by the government of Ukraine. The largest numbers of requests for administrative services is in Kherson region, the only region of so-called mainland Ukraine, which has an administrative boundary line with the temporarily occupied territory of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea. About 70% of persons addressed to our Ukrainian administrative services for registration, issuance, or exchange of Ukrainian passports. According to Ukrainian legislation in force, citizens of Ukraine with a place of registration in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol receive ID cards under the same procedure as inhabitants of other regions of Ukraine. All state healthcare institutions in all the regions of Ukraine provide qualified aid in hospitalization, medical registration, and all the other necessary medical services to Crimeans who come to the government-controlled territory. Ukraine guarantees the access of the residents of the temporarily occupied territories of Crimea to the educational programs at all levels, both on general grounds and on special educational program Crimea, Ukraine. This year, the President of Ukraine initiated a law which allows the citizens, and this law was adopted by the Verkhovna Rada, by the parliament, which allows children from temporarily occupied territories to study in Ukrainian universities situated in governmentally controlled territories without any exams and for free. Around 400 Crimeans have entered Ukrainian universities in 2020. Also, due to the regulation adopted in 2020 by the National Bank of Ukraine, residents of temporarily occupied Crimea can use all the banking services as any other Ukrainian citizens who are registered in any other region of Ukraine. These services were unavailable for the residents of Crimea since the beginning of the Russian occupation, which started in 2014. But since 2020, we have such a possibility. An official number of IDPs from the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol is more than 48,000 people, but we believe that this number can be more, can be bigger, because we understand that a lot of Crimeans didn't get the official IDP certificate. It is very important and crucial to mention that in November and December 2019, crossing facilities in the temporarily administrative boundary line with temporarily occupied Autonomous Republic of Crimea were improved significantly. The construction of the regime and service zones of the checkpoints Kalanchak and Chongar were completed. Now, the regime zones are equipped with all the necessary elements, such as good quality road pavement, premises for bodyguard officers, passport control devices, lighting, sanitary and hygienic conditions. In December 2019, large service zones to provide administrative and transport services were constructed just near the above-mentioned checkpoints Kalanchak and Chongar, so that our Ukrainian citizens who reside in Crimea can get administrative services from the state of Ukraine just on the administrative boundary line. We consider that this is a very important issue, which is even more what we do now. We are constructing a very big hub on the Chongar checkpoint, which we believe will include all the services which are necessary now for our Ukrainian citizens to have all the services done directly on administrative boundary line. We also believe that Ukraine needs to finalize the strategy for deoccupation and reintegration of Crimea. We hope that rather soon we will have results on this issue. And of course, we need to do everything possible in order to remain ties with our citizens who reside on temporarily occupied territories, because this is our link to Crimea. And so that it's very important that Ukraine remains all the administrative services for the citizens of Crimea. And we are planning to make as much services as we can in online format. Talking about human rights violations, I'm sure you pretty well know all the issues from the UN General Assembly's resolutions, but of course, systematic persecution of Crimean Tatar indigenous people and Ukrainian activists happen. Such persecution results in illegal detentions of our citizens for showing their pro-Ukrainian position and then becoming political prisoners with charges on extremism, terrorism, etc. As of now, there are more than 100 Ukrainian citizens who are political prisoners detained by the Russian occupying authorities. Most of them are Crimean Tatars. Sever Mustafayev, Seyran Saliyev, Emerusin Kuku, Volodymyr Dudka, Alexei Bessarabov, and many other Ukrainian citizens are still kept in Russian jails for committing no crime. Grave violation of international humanitarian law by the Russian occupying authorities in Crimea is forced conscription to the armed forces of the occupying power. This forced conscription started in spring 2015 and continues even now in times of COVID-19 pandemics. We believe that such a conscription is one of the most systematic war crime committed by the representatives of the Russian occupation authorities. Militarization of our Ukrainian peninsula also deals with the educational process. Children at schools study basics of military training within the framework of movement Yunarmia, so-called Kazakh schools and Kazakh classes. Our Crimean children are taught how to be prepared to battle and to fight. Educational process in the temporarily occupied Crimea has another problematic dimension. Erasure by the Russian occupation authorities of Ukrainian and Crimean Tatar national identity, in particular by limiting education in Crimean Tatar language and leaving Crimea without schools with Ukrainian as language of education. Occupation authorities also systematically use transfer of citizens of the Russian Federation to temporarily occupied Crimea. It is done with a specific intent to change the demographic map of population. Such conduct is a war crime under international law. And we believe that maybe at least 500,000 of Russian citizens were illegally transferred to the territory of our Ukrainian Crimea. Forced Russian citizenship on the territory of temporarily occupied Crimea can be deemed to be a new form of hybrid warfare, as it may be seen by the occupying power as an instrument that gives it specific rights in relation to Ukrainian citizens residing in Crimea. Some religious groups, like for instance, Crimean Diocese of Ukrainian Orthodox Church, some particular Muslim organizations, Jehovah's Witnesses, face persecution in Russian occupied Crimea. Lawyers also face problems in the temporarily occupied Crimea, in particular lawyers who defend political prisoners in courts controlled by Russia. Crimean Tatars, the indigenous people of Crimea and Ukraine, face persecution by the Russian occupation authorities for their pro-Ukrainian position and that they are not loyal to the occupying regime. Majlis of the Crimean Tatar people, the principal self-governing body of the Crimean Tatar people, is proclaimed an extremist organization in the Russian Federation, and its activity is deemed to be illegal. What is very important, we see that the situation with COVID-19 pandemics is close to catastrophic in temporarily occupied Crimea, and Russian occupation authorities are unable to protect lives and health of Crimeans, of civilian population. There are not enough places and beds in hospitals. Hospitals and doctors refuse hospitalization. Sick people are being transferred from hospitals to sanatoriums, where they are left without medical care and assistance. There is no possibility to have a test for COVID-19 voluntarily. People sometimes need to wait for more than 24 hours for an ambulance to come. There are no essential drugs in drugstores, and the statistics of COVID situation in Crimea is being distorted by the Russian occupation authorities. There is no objective information. Moreover, what we see from the beginning of January is that Russian occupation authorities started the so-called vaccination campaign in our Ukrainian Crimea with their Sputnik vaccine, which is not tested at all. And this vaccination started. The military personnel already got this vaccination. A lot of them felt badly after that. The vaccination is deemed to be a compulsory one for doctors, for medical personnel, because they are said that if you don't make this vaccination, you will be fired. And again, we don't know the results, the effects of this vaccine. There are plans that the vaccination should be compulsory for pupils in schools and students in universities. The Russian Federation also effectively closed the administrative boundary line from Kherson region to Crimea. What did they do? They implemented the decision of one entry, one exit rule, so that from Crimea you can only once leave Crimea and only once enter Crimea in times of pandemics under Russian legislation. So this is a violation, this is a limitation of the freedom of movement. All in all, unfortunately, really, Crimea remains a gray zone where the law and the human rights are not secured at all. The Russian occupation authorities continue to implement politics of systematic human rights violations, of systematic war crimes and crimes against humanity, and this is a fact. Of course, we as Ukrainian authorities, as Ukrainian governmental bodies, try to do all that we can in order to assist our citizens in these very harsh situations. We believe that together with our Georgian colleagues and friends, together with international community, especially within the framework of Crimean platform, of which I'm sure our brilliant colleague Ms. Chaparova will be talking, we will be ready to face and to fight with all these challenges which we have because of the Russian occupation of Crimea. I thank you, Ms. Moderator, and I thank you to the organizers of this important panel.
Thank you, Mr. Karinevich, for this very detailed and emotional description of these circumstances. And with this, not wasting time, let me proceed to Ms. Emina Japarova, First Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. Ms. Japarova, thank you for being with us, and we are looking forward to your commentaries. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Let me first of all express my huge gratitude to all of those who organized this important event. And I also want to thank my ambassador, His Excellency Igor Dolgov, for being a very strong linkage between our countries, because I believe when both countries survive same troubles, same crimes that we've been talking about for almost half an hour, it is automatically that it is about consolidation of our efforts. And of course, something that I will be speaking about, also about consolidation of our efforts in terms of dealing the real situation related to the Russian aggression and all those consequences that our prominent speakers, both Tamar Kocharadze and Anton Karinevich, were talking about. And let me also start with my personal reflection that happened in 2008 when I was a junior diplomat attending the Netherlands Klingendal education program. This program was devoted to all those Eastern Partnership countries, and we had 3 Georgian diplomats. This was year 2008. The very year and the very period when Georgia was bombed. And I remember how Georgian colleagues were emotionally telling about this harsh stories of Georgian reality. And I never expected that the same situation we will go through and survive in Ukraine. And of course, this event is also a cause of this consolidation. And also thank you, Anton Karinevich, for really involving all of those who listen us and the speakers and the panelists to this harsh situation in Crimea. And I used to live in Crimea in 2014 when the occupation happened. And of course, having this very personal attached to this land, to the people who lives and remain living there, and having this chance to get the first-hand information. And this initiative that we've developed, a Crimean platform, is a direct response or attempt to respond to the Russian aggression and the military consequences and militarization of the region. So I will try to perform the presentation. Give me a second, please. I hope you can see it.
You should do it by here, yes.
I hope now you can see the presentation. So of course, both of our countries have a lot in common. And this is, of course, about intensified and very intensive dialogue for decades of friendly relations and strategic partnership. Both of our countries have common aspirations, strategic orientation towards EU and NATO, and you might be aware that this ultimate goal to be the member of NATO and EU had been foreseen in our constitution with a constitutional change. So this is our ultimate goal, and all our foreign policy efforts go to this goal. Common challenges, Russian aggression, temporary occupation of parts of our territories. Let me remind that 7% of our territories under the occupation, both in Crimea and Donbass. We believe that year 2021 will be marked by intensification of our bilateral dialogue. We expect to welcome His Excellency Foreign Minister of Georgia just in March this year, and we also believe that the visit of our Prime Minister of Ukraine to Georgia will be the safeguard of this intensified dialogue. We also expect to welcome the Georgian president at the event of the Crimean platform at the summit that will take place 23rd of August in Kiev. My president has signed lots of invitations, and we believe that the participation of countries in this summit will be also a strong input to the common cause of fight of aggressions in different forms, both in South Ossetia, Abkhazia, and Crimea. We also believe that for our countries, it is crucial to intensify cooperation in all possible international formats and all levels in different organizations, not only in United Nations, but also something we have discussed a couple of days ago with the First Deputy Minister, Mr. Vakhtang Makharobrishvili, at the informal meeting initiated by Lithuania and the Ambassador at Large, Linas Linkevičius, where we shared our ideas how the Eastern Partnership and the trio association reality could be enhanced. So we are standing on that position that security engagement of Eastern Partnership and NATO is a crucial point for three countries, at least Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine, because three of our countries face almost the same problems. We think that there are many potential areas for security and defense cooperation within Eastern Partnership, and something that we performed in our joint letter of three ministers of foreign affairs, just performed 1st February to the EU member states and the EU itself. Just briefly, giving the bullets of this strengthened partnership within Eastern Partnership is that we believe that the EU engagement should be strengthened in the peaceful conflict resolution. Partners' cyber resilience should also be a part of our cooperation, because I believe that even if we put, when Tamar Kocharadze performed her speech, I believe that if we put, instead of Ossetia and Abkhazia, Crimea, the core essence would not be changed. That there are many classical and hybrid instruments how to legitimize the occupied territories. And now what we see is that both occupied territories of Crimea, Abkhazia, and Ossetia are trying to enforce their relations, thus legitimizing, the so-called foreign presence in the occupied territories, which we believe is also a hybrid instrument of attempted occupation. We believe that Eastern Partnership Cooperation Platform with the EU Hybrid Fusion Cell and the EU Cyber Security Agency can be a good chance and opportunity for both of our countries. Participation of our countries within EU common security and defense policy mission and operations, and also in PESCO projects. And the EU strategic compass can be the base of this collaboration and partnership. Another important issue is our Black Sea security, and something that we also discussed with the NATO Reflection 2030, and both of our countries was invited to share the ideas with the NATO member countries and member states on what is the perspective of both Ukraine and Georgia in this 10-year period of strategy of NATO. And of course, the most important vision was about Black Sea security. And for this course, we developed the Crimean Platform Initiative. So what is it? You can see the architecture of the Crimean Platform Initiative. This is not the international organization. This is the initiative that is aimed to support the idea of deoccupation. So our final goal and ultimate goal is deoccupation. And as we have the political and diplomatic frame of our fight, it is crucial to support and to keep the issue on the agenda of international attention and discourse. So we have a multi-dimensional system of this Crimean platform, the heads of states and government. And for this course, we will launch, as I told, the Crimean Summit in September 23rd, or in August 23rd in Kiev, where the charter of the Crimean Summit, the Crimean Charter, will be adopted. We just started to share some of the elements of this charter, which will be the political document of non-recognition of this reality. I will brief you a little bit later on that. Then the MFA, that should be the coordination body and will focus on 5 priorities of our activities. And we'll deal with the political coordination with other MFAs of those countries who joined the Crimean platform. And of course, an important track for us, international expert network and the parliament. I believe that at the second panel discussion, you also have some of our MPs perform their speech, and Rustem Umerov can deal more about and speak more about the involvement of the Ukrainian parliament to the cause of the Crimean platform. But we believe that this is also a strong voice of this discourse and a linkage to the reality and the response to that reality. We also believe that the annual security forum for Azov, Black Sea and East Mediterranean should be the core event of the Crimean platform. So this is the coordination platform that will be multidimensional. Every single dimension will not be interdependable, but will be intercompassionable. So whereas every single dimension would serve one cause, the occupation of Crimea. We have some of the priorities in our activities. So these are the 5 priorities. This is consolidation of non-recognition attempted annexation. And I believe that Georgia is #1 partner in this issue as we speak about non-viability of territories. Then enhanced monitoring of implementation of sanctions and their proper enforcement. Regional security and militarization of Crimea, Black Sea, and Azov Sea, freedom of navigation, violation of human rights and international humanitarian law, and Anton gave his profound speech on that issue. Mitigation of the adverse economic and environmental consequences. These are the 5 areas of priorities of our efforts at the moment. The key elements of the charter is also serve for the cause of this political declaration and the document, the final document that will be adopted after the summit or during the summit. So these are the elements: full commitment to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, readiness to work on strengthening the international non-recognition and sanction policies until the restoration of the territorial integrity of Ukraine, establishment of this new international format, which is about coordination and consolidation, is the Crimean platform, condemning the Russian aggression and attempted annexation of Crimea and related violations of international law by Moscow, as well as the international humanitarian and human rights law, condemning the ongoing militarization of Crimea, which poses evolving security and hybrid threats to Eastern and Southeastern Europe, Black Sea, Mediterranean, Middle East areas, negative consequences of the occupation of Crimea for the region in other areas, economy, ecology, freedom of navigation, and so on. And the final slide that I have is about the international expert network. So this is the separate dimension of activities of the Crimean platform. We have consulted a bunch of NGOs working with the Crimean issue in Ukraine. We have consolidated over 80 experts and NGOs, not only Ukraine, but also worldwide. The idea of launching this expert network is for having the content for the higher levels where researchers, publications, analytics will be performed by really experts and those who know what Crimea is today, and also a very important track, the expert diplomacy, where we believe the better voice sometimes are not officials, but people and the experts. And we want to have the network, a strong network of NGOs and think tanks worldwide, where the Crimean cause can be replaced or taken out of Kyiv to the other capitals, because of course the national agenda is very strong already. So we will be also happy to consider these options of cooperation with Georgia. And concluding my speech, I believe that we really have a lot in common, and we have to consider additional instruments, how we can strengthen our not only bilateral but also multilateral relations. And I believe that Georgia will be very much supportive to this initiative, having their own cause and actually experiencing the same troubles that we experienced both in Donbass and Crimea. I thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Japarova, for this interesting overview of the Crimea platform. It was really interesting, and also for this overview of the areas of cooperation between Georgia and Ukraine. And they are, each of them deserves the special separate discussion to explore further. And also it will be interesting to explore further what can the role of the civil society, the organizations like us, be in this process, which I also feel is quite important. But as we are running out of time, I would like to maybe proceed to the next session directly, but before, Ambassador Dohov, would you like to comment, or maybe Ms. Kochoradze, would you like to, comment on the on these issues that were raised about the cooperation between Georgia and Ukraine in the joint formats? Otherwise, we can proceed. Ambassador Dohov.
I guess we can start the second panel if there are no further comments. Good day, my name is Shota Utiashvili. I'm the senior fellow at the GFSIS, and it is my pleasure to chair the second panel, which is unfortunately also a little bit, modified. Can you hear me?
Yes, Shota, we can hear you.
Which is a little bit modified, yeah, because...
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that Ms. Tamar and Ambassador are fine to switch into the second panel. If you would like to have a comment,
Yeah. As for me, as you are also running out of time, just let me once again thank you for this organization of this panel and of this roundtable, as well as to thank Ms. Japarova for her attitude and for her priorities. And just to very briefly say that we, of course, very much share this attitude, and we are fully in line with this strategic vision of cooperation and of joining endeavors for the sake of the occupation of our territories. And I think that the same approach is on the side, of course, from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Georgia, who were unable to participate in this meeting today. So we stand on the same line, and we have the common challenges, and we of course need to encounter these challenges together. So thank you again.
Thank you, Tamar. Thank you for your comments. And now we will proceed to Shota's panel. And I just want to mention again that Mr. Georgi Borsky, first deputy chairman of the Parliament of Georgia, who was supposed to be part of this discussion, also cancelled in the last minute. Thus, sorry on behalf of the, I cannot be sorry for the help of the government, but still, for missing the speakers. Shota, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Eka. Let me welcome you once again, and also let me echo what Eka has earlier said about this being the tragic day in Georgia's modern history, with direct echoes of what happened 100 years ago. The arrest of leader of the opposition and storming of the leading Georgian opposition party headquarters certainly doesn't take Georgia on the way to the European and Euro-Atlantic integration, or on the way of being a modern state. But as we are running short of time, let me, without further ado, give the floor to Mr. Rustem Umarov, member of Verkhovna Rada, Secretary of the Committee on Human Rights, Deoccupation and Reintegration of Temporarily Occupied Territories, Donetsk, Luhansk, and the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, the city of Sevastopol, national minorities, and interethnic relations. Dear Mr. Umarov, the floor is yours, but please, maybe 5 minutes for each speaker. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to first thank our Georgian colleagues for hosting such an incredible event. Also to thank our ambassador, Mr. Dolgov, our permanent representative, Mr. Anton Karinich, and First Deputy Minister, Ms. Emine Japarova. Thank you, colleagues, for organizing. I would like to start with the fact that historically our states have faced the problems in the past and challenges. And since 1990s, Russia has been destabilizing the situation in Ukraine by promoting its false narratives, especially in Crimea, such as alleged historical affiliation with Russia. In Georgia, at the same time, in 1991, there was an armed conflict that broke out in Abkhazia, which was against the territorial integrity of Georgia, which Russia contributed to the spread of separatist sentiment in Tskhintvalia region, South Ossetia, and Abkhazia, which led to 2008 Russia-Georgia war. Since the world did not support Georgia as we wished in 2008, later it came up that in 2014, Russia launched a military aggression against Ukraine by occupying Crimea, invading eastern Ukraine. And in this context, I think Georgia and Ukraine understand each other very well. The values of our democracy and respect for human rights are crucial for both of our states. I'd like to emphasize that these actions of Russian Federation against both our states are a part of Russia's foreign policy, a strategy of constant pressure and influence on independent states to prevent our European and Euro-Atlantic choice. Now our both states face a challenge in the form of temporarily occupied territories. Understanding the need and urgency of developing not only a strategy of the occupation, but also a reintegration. Another issue that deserves attention is the problem of security in the Black Sea region. Russia is turning Crimea into a constantly growing military base, which is being re-equipped with military equipment. Russia's policy poses a danger to all the states in the region and hinders the development of trade in the region. Russia is using Black Sea as a basis of projecting its power into both Mediterranean and Middle East. In my opinion, NATO should pay more attention to Black Sea region and in its strategy. And one of the ways to solve this problem could be establishment of kind of a triangle that unites NATO, Ukraine, Georgia. With this kind of triangle, we both countries know that we want to be a part of NATO, but also we should conduct joint naval air exercises, exchange intelligence. Such cooperation would be an important step towards realizing our Euro-Atlantic aspirations for both of our states. In this context, it's also necessary to fill the NATO membership action plan with a practical content and obtain the nearest future. I'm convinced that the investigation of war crimes committed by Russian authorities in international courts and prosecution of those who are guilty is within the scope of our common interest. Also, Ukraine and Georgia are connecting East and West, attracting foreign investment, and it plays a huge role in ensuring the security in the Black Sea region. And it guarantees the formation of the security belt. Mutual investments of both Ukraine and Georgia should also increase. In fact, our both states participate in infrastructure projects from east to west, and it also gives some opportunities to joint mutual cooperation. It is also important to us to share our experience in context of overcoming the consequences of aggression. Georgia has a longer history of resolving this issue at the legislative level, so your expertise in this area would be interesting to us. It would be useful to learn more about your experience in resolving the issues of sanctions, facilitating reintegration, work with people from the occupied territories, and it probably would be useful for both countries to organize cooperation in the level of parliamentary committees. For example, we would like to hear from your representatives from the Committee on Human Rights and Civil Integration and Committee on Defense and Security about Georgia's experience in this area. If we're talking about the actions taken by Ukraine in order to force Russia to comply with the international law in the temporarily occupied territories, I'd like to point out that we try to raise awareness of foreign colleagues about the human rights situation in Crimea during meetings at various levels. For example, during the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe, where the Georgian delegation was present in the winter plenary session, the issue of human rights violation in Crimea was raised. We thank Georgian colleagues for supporting us. During these meetings, we as Ukrainian delegation emphasized the importance of international support and increased international pressure for the release of our political prisoners. During my speech at the PACE, I raised the issue of discrimination on the basis of ethnic and confessional grounds within the debates about the problem of ethnic profiling in Europe. Since 2014, we've been working on a strategic decision of how to ensure the deoccupation of Crimea. In 2020, it was decided to establish such a format called as a Crimean platform, which President has addressed in United Nations. As my colleagues already mentioned, it concludes 4 dimensions: the level of heads of states, governmental level, the level for the parliamentarians, and expert level. We, as members of parliament, initiated a formation of interfactional group called Crimean Platform inside of the parliament. And the purpose which we try to achieve is to form and implement the parliamentary track within the framework to unify our state strategy of deoccupation and integration of Crimea. And as MPs, we focus on gaining support at the international level by using all tools of our interparliamentary dialogue. It includes bilateral cooperation with the EU countries, US, Canada, and we emphasize the importance in the Black Sea region, states such as Georgia, Turkey, and other, for increasing the cooperation with the international organization. We also, just to sum up, are drawing the number of legislative acts now dealing with the different issues of reintegration and deoccupation, namely the laws on sanctions policy, protection of cultural heritage, determination of the status and assistance of political prisoners, prisoners of war. Among our priorities is also protection of Crimean Tatars as indigenous people and support to their comprehensive development. I once again would like to thank for the opportunity to speak, and thanks once again organizers for organizing such an event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Umerov. Very interesting speech indeed. There are a few points that I think Georgia and Ukraine can cooperate even further. One issue that is very important here and is also very important in Ukraine is the issue of prisoners. What we see is that they are arresting increasing number of the ordinary citizens for crossing the ABL and sentencing them to a longer and longer prison terms. The last person was sentenced, I think, to 12 years in jail. In this context, there is a decision of the European Court of Human Rights in the case Georgia against Russia in 2008. More can be helpful because Strasbourg Court basically has said that Russia is responsible for the human rights violations on the territory occupied by itself. Now, of course, Russia is not responsible for any human rights violations on its own territory for now, but hopefully that will change someday. And of course, a very important thing is the Black Sea security, and Georgia and Ukraine should cooperate much more than now on trying to put as much content in it as possible. But thank you again, and without further ado, let me go to Georgi Togushi, who is the former ombudsman of Georgia and also has worked in UN and Council of Europe on human rights issues on a very high level. So Georgi, please, floor is yours, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Shota. Thank you. And it's really my pleasure and honor to participate in this high-level conference, high-level meeting, and to discuss current challenges when it comes to occupied territories, also so-called gray zones when it comes to human rights protection and also remedies available to people who still remain on those territories and especially fall into the group of vulnerable people and are largely affected by the regimes which now run those occupied territories. I mean, for sure, Abkhazia, Ossetia, and also Crimea, and also other zones which are currently not under the control of the central government. I mean, Georgia and Ukraine. And indeed, I mean, I was listening also to the previous speakers who raised numerous issues regarding human rights on occupied territories. And I think that today, well, we can also mention issues which are quite similar when it comes to situation on the territory of Georgia and Ukraine, when it comes to human rights in general, and also problems which are quite indicative of difficult situation in all three occupied territories, which means that there is lack of effective monitoring system when it comes to international presence. Remedies are not available. Numerous violations of human rights are not reported and they go unnoticed. And sure, there is a daily risk of breaching rights of people who are there. And sometimes I have to say that the breaches of human rights are rather grave. Already previous speakers mentioned issues of abductions and detentions of Georgian citizens who are quite often taken to Tskhinvali and imprisoned there. Also, same happens in Abkhazia, problems with different human rights. However, when focusing on the rights of Crimean Tatars, who I think represent the largest group of minorities and also indigenous people of Crimea, and Ukrainians who became de facto minority following Crimea's annexation, I mean, the violations are really grave. And actually, when you look into the reports, which are still available from a number of sources, when you also read UN General Assembly resolutions, also Human Rights Council resolutions, reports from different organizations such as the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights, OSCE, Council of Europe, you see that such violations have occurred in numerous areas, which include violations of the freedom of expression, conscience and religion, right to peaceful assembly and association, well, freedom of media, access to information, the right to fair trial and effective remedy, right to education, access to healthcare, access to native language, linguistic and cultural rights. Also, few extrajudicial killings and executions were reported from Crimea as of 2014. And one of the main issues that Russian legislation was retroactively, automatically applied on Crimea, and also legislation on extremism and terrorism on the criminal code provisions similar to that law have been applied extensively by the de facto authorities in order to silence the dissent of the Crimeans who opposed the annexation of Crimea, and also targeting non-Russian religious and ethnic groups, especially Crimean Muslims, most of whom are Crimean Tatars. So there are also cases of grave violations of the rights to life, liberty, security, physical integrity, and minority group representatives that have not been investigated at all. And actually, Mr. Utiashvili already mentioned the recent ruling of the European Court of Human Rights. There is also admissibility decision from the ECHR on interstate complaint Ukraine versus Russia, which is quite promising, which lists numerous human rights violations committed in Crimea, and also mentions, sure, the effective control of Russians over all those territories which are now occupied, also in the process of occupation. And also, sure, I mean, international community remains as one of the main tools in our hands, both for Ukraine and Georgia, somehow to manage to minimize the risks, also somehow to manage, attract more international attention, to put pressure on Russia, somehow to try to find some international remedies, apply to all international institutions, including courts and other bodies within UN, within OSCE, within Council of Europe, and also largely benefit from human rights organizations' work, which try to collect information and document human rights violations from all those territories, which remain to be quite grave and systemic. European Court of Human Rights uses this term administrative practice both in regard of Georgia and Georgian occupied territories and Crimea when it talks about Russia, its effective control over all the activities related to the human rights violations, and especially administrative practice, which involves terrible things, including eviction of people, deprivation of property, extrajudicial killings, imprisonment, lack of fair trial, and suppression of the minorities. And we know how many people from all territories had to flee their homes, and now they are either having status of the internally displaced persons or they are refugees in some other countries. And well, Ukraine and Georgia have also to share this problem when it comes to the internally displaced people and also to refugees which had to leave the jurisdiction of our countries and now reside elsewhere. So actually, when we talk about ethnic cleansing, when we talk about grave violations of the minority rights, we do understand that currently it's very difficult to keep Russia responsible for all those violations, but proper work, proper documenting of all the violations, also proper recording of all those problems which occur, also sure all other activities which can contribute to the international litigation, also trying to use all the international avenues somehow once again to remind the civilized world what are the atrocities done by the Russians and by the proxy regimes which are under their direct control one day should bring perpetrators to justice. And I really hope that this day will come when our people will be able to return back to their homes, and then there will be sure big support to help them to resettle in their home places, although it might take a while. However, the work we do should contribute to that at the end of the day. And also recent General Assembly resolution on Crimea, also Human Rights Council resolution on Georgia and its occupied territories, also rulings of the European Court of Human Rights, also ICJ interim measure regarding Ukraine in 2017. All these things still prove that international community still has an adequate attitude when it comes to the occupied territories, and this will be never tolerated. So we have to continue working. Human rights experts, human rights monitoring organizations have to continue documenting all those issues, and one day, sure, it will be our goal to make sure that nobody enjoys impunity from the atrocities and these grave human rights violations which were committed on all occupied territories, which unfortunately remain as the gray zones when it comes to ensuring people's liberties and their human rights. And many thanks for the attention. I think we can talk endlessly about the breaches of human rights on all occupied territories. However, I know that I have a bit exceeded even time provided by our esteemed moderator. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Georgi. Thank you very much. And our next speaker is Mr. Nariman Ustayev, who is the director of Kaspersky Institute for Geostrategy. Mr. Ustayev, floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dear colleagues, it's a pleasure and honor to participate in this discussion. I would like to start with profound changes happening in Black Sea region. In last year, the number of conflicts has doubled. The number of human rights violations is rocketing, and every single issue has become the matter of national security. All as a consequence of the way Russia has chosen to act, where the camouflage is a primary color, actually. Russian occupation and militarization of Crimea are central to achieving Russia's goals of enhancing its influence over neighboring states. But first and foremost, I have to underline that all Ukrainian citizens are suffering the negative consequences of Russian aggression, of Russian occupation of Crimea. But no one is this playing out as dramatically as Crimean Tatars. Under Russian occupations, Crimea is no longer a peaceful homeland for its indigenous people, as it should be. Recently, Ukraine has announced the Crimean platform, which will become a new international format instrument aimed at coordination of international community's efforts to deoccupy Crimea and protect human rights. What does the successful formula for the Crimean platform mean? I have good reason to believe that while negotiating with foreign partners, Ukrainian officials should state the following. We have done everything in our power on the Crimea issue. And now Ukraine needs international support to unlock the deoccupation process. And it should be clearly understood that the solution to the Crimean problem is inseparable with the Crimean Tatar people, including ensuring conditions for the development in Ukraine. So one thing that we have to do is make sure that all parts of Ukrainian government authorities work together as an integrated team to achieve these goals. That is the message we need to articulate in Ukraine and actually with our allies. And moreover, I've mentioned security challenges, and in this context, I want to emphasize that we need to develop a clear vision and strategy for the Black Sea region, as previous speakers have mentioned, which plays a powerful role in the international security architecture as a whole. Russian occupation and militarization of Crimea are central to achieving Russia's goals of enhancing its influence over neighboring states and providing a military platform which can more effectively threaten democracies from the Baltic region to the Mediterranean. From a Russian perspective, I believe there is a great deal at stake around the Black Sea region. Any challenge there directly affects not only Russian security, but also it claims to great power status. And that is the reason why level of human rights in Crimea after its occupation by Russia has decreased significantly. Everyone should be forced to leave Crimea if they don't recognize Russian policy, Russian occupation administration. And Russia tries to persecute Crimean Tatars and all pro-Ukrainian activists and replace them with Russian citizens who are brought in Crimea in a way like compulsory military service. Nevertheless, Russian propaganda, Russian information operations on its military actions or political persecution in temporarily occupied Crimea cannot change the legal status of Crimea, which is inseparable part of Ukraine. And I do believe that Crimea has already occupied a very special place in Ukrainian harsh today's reality, and indeed in Ukrainian's prosperous future, I believe. So thank you. Mr. Moderator?
Shota, please unmute yourself.
Yes,
We cannot hear you.
yes. I wanted to thank Mr. Rustayev, and yeah, but because of we are short of time, let's keep the question and answer session at the end of our discussion. And now, without further ado, I'll give the floor to the next moderator, Mr. Georgi Badridze, who is going to join us in a second. Thank you, Georgi.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for your participation. I wish we were meeting on another day when the grave problem of Georgia's and Ukraine's occupation was the main focus for everyone. But today, the reality is that the situation has aggravated in Tbilisi, and when Georgia's democracy is definitely suffered a severe blow, the prospects of the occupation, prospects of further integration into the European structures definitely is not enhanced, is not helped. Today we have four distinguished panelists, and these are the ambassadors of our, from the European countries, all of these countries have significantly contributed to Georgia's progress toward its European future. And today it would be very important to hear from them their assessment of the situation, both about the occupation, but also, I'm afraid, it would be very hard to avoid the latest deterioration in terms of democratic and political process in Georgia. I would like to give floor to the German ambassador, Mr. Hubert Knirsch, if we can actually have him, because I can't quite see him being present. So, well, it seems that we do not have German ambassador at present. So, if I could ask Monsieur Diego Colas, then I saw him just very recently.
Hello.
Yes,
Hello.
yes,
Yes,
yeah. Monsieur the Ambassador. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for organizing this meeting. I would really like to thank Igor and the Rondelli Foundation for having this meeting and for inviting me. I feel this as a great honor. Unfortunately, as you mentioned, this is a rather packed day, and I will have to leave the meeting around 3:45, and that means I very much regret that, because that's usually the most interesting part of conferences, the one of questions, that I will unfortunately have to miss somewhat. But I'm still always ready to address these issues, and again, I want to stress how grateful I am to be invited. I want to, at the outset, to restate a position that you well know, which is that the French government strongly supports the territorial integrity of Ukraine and Georgia. And I feel it is important to restate this position and to restate it often, if only because this is a position on which we act on a regular basis, in particular when we push on the non-recognition policy, which is important for everyone. Today's panels ask a more specific question, which is how to achieve the possibility for Georgia and Ukraine to recover full control over their internationally recognized territory, and what can the international community do about this? In my view, the best way is for both countries to follow steadfastly their strategy of transforming their state, their economy, their society into genuinely European states, economies, and societies. And I am aware how to the point this question is to today's events. There is a clear support for this endeavor, at least in Georgian society, and we could see it during the celebration of the 1918-1921 First Republic that took place the past few days. Let us be clear that today this effort means the consolidation of the rule of law. And by the rule of law, I mean a determined effort to eradicate corruption and to limit political influences in the judiciary, and more generally, the rejection of the collusion of interest between politics and business. This is where international support can be the most helpful. Georgia and Ukraine obviously are keen to see the success of this endeavor. Let me underline that Europe and the West also care very much. I think this has been touched on in previous interventions. 30 years ago, most countries were hoping and many were striving to achieve comprehensive reforms towards Western-style liberal democracy. This is not so true anymore, as a recent analysis by The Economist, the newspaper, highlighted. Other powers are claiming that the future is not for liberal democracy, but for national autocracy. Now, I do not believe this to be true, but we need to be clear and to see with clear eyes the challenge to liberal democracy as a principle of governance that is being put to us in the present world. And we also need to see that Georgia and Ukraine are one of the main battlegrounds for that challenge. And so we too in Europe and the West have quite a lot at stake in this project. Such a project is a long-term one. We are talking about deep reforms, generation change, comprehensive transformation of worldviews. It is already well on its way, something your biggest neighbor sometimes fails to completely realize. It is also a process that is reversible, which politicians sometimes fail to fully appreciate, because this demands steadfast commitment to fundamental rule of fairness and fundamental rules of moderation in political behavior. I very much believe in its ultimate success because I feel that this drive to build fully European states and societies is merely a reconnection with the fundamental roots of both countries. In Georgia, as well as in Ukraine, one can find most of the strata that make European civilization. There were Greek kingdoms, there was Roman law, there were Middle Ages with the national idea arises from feudalism and Christendom, like they did in Western Europe. There was a 19th century dominated by powerful streams such as nationalism, liberalism, and romanticism. There was even a brief social democratic experience in Georgia. And so this tree has deep roots, this tree of Europeanization has deep roots, and that makes me optimistic about the ultimate success. Supporting massively this endeavor is the heart of what we, France and the EU, are doing in Georgia and Ukraine. And I will use a point to illustrate this. The French ambassador in Kiev and myself are not lifelong specialists of Russia affairs. We are both lifelong specialists of EU affairs. And this is because a key part of our job is to develop cooperations which, while being specifically French, also integrate themselves as full component of Team Europe within the Eastern Partnership and the many opportunities offered by the ambitious association agreements that link the EU to Georgia and Ukraine. I know that for most of you, the key issue is membership, and that there are frustrations with the uncertainties of such a prospect. It is indeed a fact that there is a debate within the EU over the pace and the limits of enlargement, and that this discussion is still underway. In this regard, allow me to stress that there is a serious risk associated with making this issue an either-or question, as if anything but entry would be a failure. There are many disinformation channels active in both countries, you know that even better than I do, and they portray the issue exactly in this light of an either-or. It is clear why they do so. They do so to discourage the real transformation of Georgia and Ukraine into European states and societies, which is really going on and which is the real name of the game. So let us be clear. While this debate is going on, the continuation of the reforms towards reaching the reality of Europeanness, with our strong help, should still go ahead full steam. This is why we are working on several important issues to build human bridges between Georgia and Ukraine and the EU and France. Now, I will mention those we are working on in Georgia because these are the ones I'm the more familiar with, such as visa-free regime and the success of the visa-free regime, also with the labor migration schemes, investment and development towards European standards, e.g. in agriculture, hydrogen industry, the presence of Western economic sectors as a drive for transformation of society, for example, Carrefour, which helps implement or develop the application of EU regulations in the countryside, university cooperation to invest in skills. In France, it has a particular aspect to it, which is that we promote girls to top education and women to top jobs. Why? Because most of the French speakers in both countries are women, and therefore all our activity to bring to further education or to job is also one way to further gender equality. And there are many other cooperations. In Georgia, I think about health, and especially electronic health, water management, juvenile justice, others. So how is this actually helping restore full sovereignty over your internationally recognized territory? Quite simply by the same long-term but irresistible process whereby West Berlin helps reunify Germany, merely by being successful and attractive. You will say, and rightly, that in the meantime, security still needs to be assured. West Berlin was able to play that role of eroding the cliffs of oppression because its security had been safeguarded in 1948 and 1961. There too, I suggest not to conflate appearance and reality. The most important thing is less being a member of a relevant organization, in this case NATO, than training together, fighting together, having our armed forces concretely joined up. This is the reason why we support the establishment in Georgia of a strong air defense. The recent conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh underlines the importance of a joined-up system allowing both the information gathering and also a variety of possible response and a coordinated command system. Having such a robust air defense would be significant improvements. The future is about the integration of information and reaction and the capacity to interact within a NATO framework. This is what we are working on with Georgia, and we're hoping to make progress, and we are keen to make progress soon because this is actually an important, very important thing. There are plenty of other actions underway to strongly support the Georgian armed forces, e.g. in mountain infantry training or through operating jointly in Africa, which helps our forces know how to interact one with the other. A key issue is security in the Black Sea concerning both countries. This too is a matter of priority for us. For many years, we have made sure to have at least once a year a French ship, at least one, and if not more, a French ship navigating in the Black Sea. The point is to stress our right and our capacity to do so. It is also to know the navigation condition and the area well. And I hope we will continue on that rhythm and even improve it. Last but not least, there is a question of the way we, France, the EU, should interact when it comes to the big northern neighbors that has been dominating many of the conversations so far, and rightly. I was recently reading an article by Raymond Aron. Raymond Aron was a French philosopher, analyst of the Cold War, a man whose realistic and lucid views have most often been proven right. He was commenting on a moment in 1958 when Nikita Khrushchev was making overtures for detente. Aron was reacting to the position of those who never want to have any discussion of any sort with the Soviet Union because it was an absolute evil, and noting that they were risking missing opportunities. He was also reacting, more harshly to be frank, to the position of those who too quickly see great perspectives in any promise of dialogue, as he noted that they could too easily be misled and tricked. His view was simply that we should have an intermediate approach, that of good old diplomacy. We talk to the other side in order to know and understand it better, and in order to make sure that it understands our position well. Perhaps also to feed suggestions into that decision-making process, to give food for thought which will percolate through the system. Perhaps to feed the thinking of the small hands in the room that will be the potential future leader or the potential next generation, to be sure that our ideas are somewhere in the policy debate for the future, investing in the future. And by the way, among those positions that we are keen to push in this way is the position that we strongly support the right of Georgia and Ukraine to basically go down the routes that they have chosen for themselves. And why we feel strongly about this. This is what we did publicly with Germany last December 12 over the situation in Georgia, in particular the last paragraph about territorial integrity. Why territorial integrity again? But in this context where discussions had been taking place with the de facto president of Abkhazia and the president of Russia, we thought it was important to restate how strongly we felt about territorial integrity. Of course, when we talk to a Russian diplomat, no one should think that we are like two philosophers genuinely trying to solve a difficult problem. There is an issue of trust, there is an issue of commonality of view that is lacking for this to be some sort of a joint endeavor. It's a more diplomatic, more of a difficult discussions. We are here to pass messages, to explore the other side real concerns behind the words, what really they are saying. And also, we also feel that it is very important to do that together and well coordinated within the EU. And it is through this strong coordination with the EU that we have pushed very strongly to support the territorial integrity of Ukraine. And we've done so especially within the Normandy format and also of Georgia, including recently with démarche to urge a more constructive engagement of Russia in the Geneva international talks. I will conclude because I have spoken already quite a long time. I will merely say that anyone who tries to answer the question of this panel by offering a silver bullet, a simple solution, is, in my view, unfortunately, too impatient. The approach that I would push for is a mix of patience, steadfastness in reform, determination in support, strong posture, and a willingness to explain our views, so that gradually, keeping our eyes on the prize, we may reach our shared objective of seeing Georgia and Ukraine become strong, attractive European states and societies whose strength creates stability and the basis for prosperity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Very upbeat presentation. Can I please give now floor to His Excellency, Mr. Mariusz Maśkiewicz, Ambassador of the Republic of Poland to Georgia. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thanks you. Thanks very much. Thanks, Kolas, for the speech you have prepared. And the time you have occupied, because I did not have prepared such speech, and prepared only a few remarks that could relate to what was told. I fully share the opinion of my colleague from Paris, and we are in the European Union and OSCE organization trying to be as active as possible to go forward to the needs of Kiev and Tbilisi concerning the occupied territories. And so it is not enough to say that Poland is fully supporting territorial integrity and sovereignty of both countries, but we could review, of course, and so I could spend, a lot of time to enumerate our initiatives in EU and OSCE and in other international organizations. But it is still not effective. We are still, let's say, facing the problem that we do speak quite a different language with the country who is ruling in these territories, occupied territories, Moscow. So it was very visible during the last visit of the head of European diplomacy that he was completely speaking from the position which is very far from Mr. Lavrov, Putin, and the team of ruling equipe in Moscow. So this is the problem: how to build, let's say, the platform of common understanding. However, I suppose that they do understand us. They read our intentions very excellent, and they do know what to do, but their intentions are completely different and go close to ours. Second remark is concerning your efforts, Georgia's efforts towards Abkhazia and Ossetia. I have learned through my work service in Georgia that you made a lot of initiatives. You've initiated a lot of efforts to build confidence among Abkhazians, Ossetians, and Georgians. You've tried to build institutions, social and humanitarian programs. You tried to open your let's say your society for trade with Ossetia, and so it resulted with the aggression of Russia in 2008, as we know, because they were very afraid about rising significance of Georgia and the rising influence. After the Rose Revolution, you showed that you could develop very fast, and it was, kind of illness for Moscow, that it is not desirable in Tskhin Valley or in Abkhazia. And so this was the reason for escalation, and this was the reason for reaction of Putin, and resulted with a hot conflict with Georgian army. The third remark I do have, and I would like to share with you, is based on my last, it is not, of course, the time to share with you, the researches, scientific, inquiries and so on, because it is the problem of the political resolutions, the problem of the political reactions. But still, I trying to understand more the Georgian history. I went into the into the biography of Noe Jordania. I read his book, My Life, which is extremely interesting. I recommend all of you just to understand what has happened 100 years ago in Georgia and around Georgia. It explains me a lot of, because Jordania was the representative of the democratic country, democratic state, very fresh, let's say, very new one, but still having a full international support. I mean, the results of Versailles Agreement and then the kind of the umbrella from the League of Nations, and so he and his compatriots could believe that the Europe, as they assisted with the birth of independence, I mean Germans, English, French, and so on, they believed that they could be supported widely more than they were, and in result, so they occurred with the aggression, with a wild aggression of Bolsheviks, of their, let's say, enemies. The Bolshevism is a kind of illness. It is still, let's say, we are witnessing having the movies in front of my eye of Sergei Lozhnitsa about Donetsk and occupied regions. I realize that still we are facing the same problems as our fathers and grandfathers had with Bolsheviks in the beginning of 20th century. We are dealing with Bolsheviks recidivism, so relapse, recurrence nowadays, and so we see it in particularly in Russia, observing the Navalny's case and so on, so on. So I would summarize my, let's say, presenting my few remarks with one phrase that I heard from my friend, former dissident, Alexander Podrabinek, who told that Russia now is occupied by Bolsheviks. And this is the reason of our problems we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Can I now give floor to the Ambassador of the Republic of Lithuania in Georgia, His Excellency Andrius Skilindra. Ambassador, please.
Thank you very much for opportunity, and thank you very much for inviting to speak on this very specific and very painful topic, the loss of the territories by the brutal acts of one of the country, one of the members of the UN Security Council that contradicts the principles of UN Charter that calls to maintain international peace and security, and especially when these things do happen just during these decades, when the Western values and the values of democracy, rule of law, fundamental human rights are so much important, but unfortunately not in all the regions of European continent. And let me recall back my service at the UN being in 2014, when the occupation of Crimea took place, and we had a dilemma how to respond internationally to this breach of UN Charter, and the General Assembly was very keen to adopt the resolution on territorial integrity of Ukraine. And very sadly, let me remind that there were still 5 countries, UN member states, who voted against one of the key principles of the territorial integrity and sovereignty, one of the key principles of United Nations Charter. So here, indeed, it's what most important that the notion of the territorial integrity would not be downscaled by international community. And you know that Lithuania is a very strong supporter, and this is one of the key principles of our foreign policy, just to obey the United Nations Charter, and then to have these pillars like freedom, rule of law, democracy, one of the key denominators in undertaking any of the foreign policy initiative. So, of course, myself also, I had an opportunity to visit the front line, the administrative border of the Ukraine and occupied Donetsk regions in Avdiivka, and I saw indeed that this is a tragedy for the people, tragedy for the country, and the calls from international community towards the forces of Russian Federation to withdraw back, they are being still ignored. So, but at the same time, it is very important just to build up the resilience within the countries, to strengthen the economic and socio-economic environment, to work on the further reforms, and to make the country resilient to any of the actions from inside. So here, the Baltic states, to some extent, may be an example in order just to consolidate all the internal political actors to work for the sake of the country, to work for the future of the country, and then to unite themselves based on the strategic interest of the country. Would it be reforms? Would it be the Euro-Atlantic aspirations, or would be anything else? In Lithuania, we do have the tradition that all political parties, they are signing the declaration that notwithstanding the future eventual results in the parliamentary elections, all political parties will obey the same principles regarding the security and foreign policy initiatives. Talking about especially three associated members, Ukraine, Moldova, and then Georgia, the Eastern Partnership Summit is approaching this year, and my government is working very much and very intensively on the ambitious agenda of this Eastern Partnership, and agenda definitely it comprises on the values, as I've talked just a minute ago, but also it's about the additional support on behalf of the European Union. COVID vaccines, they are becoming the geopolitical issue. And our government has initiated the joint letter of 13 EU member states asking the European Commission to step in and to assist Eastern Partnership countries to use the instruments, already existing instruments by the European Commission, and just to extend hand of support, hand of a very practical and very emotionally and psychologically important support by ensuring the access to the COVID vaccines. In order, it would be another element of the real, tangible, and immediate support on behalf of the European Union. And as one of the colleagues has mentioned, indeed, the diplomacy, this is about the talking, this is about the discussion, this is about the elements of finding the joint initiatives. It's very important. Very unfortunately, we just have witnessed the visit of EAS had Mr. Borrell in Moscow, and we saw that Unfortunately, the visit itself was not unfortunate, but the unfortunate was that the other party, the Russian Federation, was not ready indeed just to meet the extended hand on behalf of the European Union to engage in a more positive way. And Russian Federation has chosen to act as it has acted before by ignoring this political will. And the political will in each case is the most predominant. So we have to work together. We have to understand each country's together, and this discussion is very important in order just to capture all the elements around that are needed before taking steps ahead. So once again, this is very important period for Georgia, having in mind the centenary of the constitution, having in mind the centenary of the Soviet occupation, and me being representative of a small country, the country of the same region. It's indeed very important that at least for that day, for 25th of February, there would be the sense of the unity in the country, because this is the most needed for all the people, notwithstanding their political opinions and political ambitions. So the unity, political wisdom, and will to work together in order would never ever happen. These what happened in the entire region would be 1921 or 1945. I do appreciate once again, Mr. for your initiative to invite us and to talk about a very important, still painful issue. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I would like to thank all the participants, and before I give floor to Dr. Metravelli for closing remarks, I would like to say that I'm really pleased that there is a growing consensus in the West that the occupation of Ukraine and Georgia, Russia's treatment of its neighbors, is not a matter of purely bilateral or regional affairs. It's the expression of Russia's Cold War style behavior, and this is a direct quote from Monsieur Borrell, who recently was given the Cold War style treatment in Moscow. And I cannot but agree that the solution is in unity, both internal and also international, vis-a-vis this new global threat. I would say this is not the exaggeration, I'm afraid, that now we are dealing with something that is far beyond the regional problem. Thank you very much once again. And unless anyone has any additional remarks, I'm pleased to give floor to President Metravelli for her closing statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgi, and thank you to the presenters, Ambassador Skolas, Mashkevich, and Ambassador Kalindrov. Thank you very much for your commentaries and unity, political wisdom, and working together is probably what we should be following on in order to achieve our goal and get out of this Bolshevik occupied space and the post-Soviet space. I would like to thank all the panelists from Ukraine and Georgia as well for the interesting presentations. As mentioned in the beginning, I sincerely believe that we, Ukraine and Georgia, should stick together, use the vast resources that we have in terms of bonds and historical friendship between our people, and mobilize these resources for coming up with the joint efforts for advancing our common goal. And there are many areas of cooperation, so eloquently described by First Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Ms. Japarova, today. And we as a Georgian civil society organization, we have been cooperating with our Ukrainian partners, think tanks, and non-governmental organizations. And we are ready to continue to further this, our work to reach our common goal, the occupation of our territories and support of democratic development of our countries. I would like to thank also our moderators and thank Ambassador with us from the Foundation and for engaging us in this interesting and important, though sad, discussion for topic for our countries. Thank you, Ambassador, and I would ask you to comment on the final words. Ambassador.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate contribution of all our panelists, and my special thanks to my colleagues ambassadors. Your vision and your position clearly expressed today is very important for us, for both countries, Georgia and Ukraine. And of course, situation with pandemic COVID infection made the situation regarding occupied territories even more grave. And now when, with better conditions, we will try to accumulate our efforts and resources to be more active, more proactive, and to achieve more visible results. I thank you all, and I wish to again to draw your attention to the statement of Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Emina Japarova, that we are looking forward to host high-level participants during the summit of Crimean platform in August in Kyiv, Ukraine. Thank you very much, dear Eka.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you, Eka. Thank you all. Bye.